welcome back to the Three-Handed Bandits channel. It's Nathan back with another video for you today, unveiling our 15th ranked Tennessee Titans in our 2023 to 2024 NFL preseason power rankings. Now, in the last video, I unveiled the Jacksonville Jaguars. Today, we're talking about the Tennessee Titans. Now, these are two teams that I think I have very differing opinions on. I'm very excited to tell you why I'm so much higher on this Tennessee Titans team, and I think a lot of people are in the NFL media. Before we get into that, please like and subscribe and share this video with somebody you care about. We'll be out with the number 14 team very, very soon. But as I said, Tennessee Titans, yeah, this is a team that I think I'm a lot higher on than much of the public opinion. And I'm excited to tell you why. Now, I think a lot of people think that Jacksonville is the clear front runner for this division. Not only do I think that this team is a lot closer to Jacksonville, I think they're a lot better than Jacksonville. And we'll kind of start talking about that as we first talk about their offseason. Now, I think this is a team that had a pretty solid offseason. It starts off, they bring in Tim Kelly, formerly the offensive coordinator, when DeAndre Hopkins, was in Houston at one point. But they go ahead and bring him in, and they replace Todd Downing, who was kind of just copying the Shanahan kind of scheme in place, wasn't really adding or doing much. So that should be hopefully an upgrade at the offensive coaching. And in the second round, they bring in Will Levis. Is kind of just give him a little bit more upside at a quarterback position as they head into their future, because Malik Willis may not be that great of a player. They also bring in Tyjae Spears to be another running back option for this team. And I think one of the biggest signings of the offseason was DeAndre Hopkins, who is still legit and who can still play. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. They bring in Andre Dillard at tackle. They draft Peter Skoronski in the first round. They bring in Daniel Brunskill, just kind of help fill out this offensive line, which is pretty weak. They also bring in Arden Key, who had a really good year last year in Jacksonville. They bring in Azeez Al-Shaair from the 49ers and Sean Murphy-Bunting. Overall, though, losses-wise, I think they upgraded a lot, because a lot of the people that they did lose were kind of just aging veterans who weren't great for this team. So obviously, they also lose Hassan Haskins, who seems like he's a horrible human being. He's on the suspension list. But they lose Robert Woods, Austin Hooper, Taylor Lewan, Ben Jones, Bud Dupree. Some of these just aging veterans that were kind of a little bit washed and really were not super productive for this team. Then they lose Nate Davis, DeMarcus Walker, and David Long, who were pretty solid players for this team last year, but they think they have pieces in place to replace them, at least to an adequate level. Let's go ahead and talk about this coaching. This is part of the reason that I am so high on this team, is this handsome man in front of you, Mike Vrabel. I think Mike Vrabel, to me, is probably one of the top 10 head coaches in the NFL. He's just an overall X's and O's guy. His defense, I think, is very well coached up. But also just from a leadership point, I think, he's a player's coach. They seem to fucking play their ass off for them. They seem to love him. And I think he's a really smart player. He was a linebacker and a player in this league for a long time. And so I think he can relate to these guys. And he's just one of these, I think if you're going to be a defensive coach, you do need to be a little bit more of a rah-rah, kind of get your guys hyped for them to buy into playing defense. And I think he does an excellent job of getting this team to be really well coached, to be aggressive, to want to go out there and play and win. I can't sing his praises enough. I think he's a really good player, really good coach. And then Shane Bowen underneath him, I imagine sooner than later, at some point might start getting head coaching or other defensive coordinator shots, just because he's been here for a well-coached defense that really has gotten the best of some of the players that they've had, who haven't always been the most talented at times. And then Tim Kelly is probably going to bring in a bit of a modern pro spread and really kind of help evolve this offense. He is not quite the Shanahan style coaching that they've had for the last several years here. And so it'll be interesting to see how they manage the switch, and how of a sudden transition that is going to be. I imagine he's a good coach, and that this offense is going to be a lot more productive than I think some people are going to realize. Now, it is go ahead and talk about this offense and start off with the quarterback. I think part of the reason that this team is being slept on is the quarterback position. So obviously, Ryan Tannehill broke out of nowhere. No one was expecting his kind of rise. And so then I think he got a little bit too much hype, and then he didn't live up to that hype, and then the hype, the public perception of him went all the way down. Like it kind of, um, people were too low on him, and then everybody became high on him. Now it's kind of way too low again. It's somewhere in the middle, around the kind of the 16th ish best quarterback. He's every much of Jared Goff, Tua Tagovailoa, Geno Smith, even Trevor Lawrence. I think he's closer to Trevor Lawrence than Trevor Lawrence is to Justin Herbert, if I'm being entirely honest. So I still think he's a good player. He's not perfect. He does need a good scheme, otherwise he can be bit mistake prone. He needs good blocking. He needs his receivers to be open. He's not perfect. He will make mistakes. But he's got some sneaky athleticism. He's got a good arm. Can play within the structure of an offense. So as long as the structure around him is solid, you can get top 10 play and an AFC Championship run, and almost knocking off the Chiefs to make the Super Bowl. That's what you need in order for him to be a great quarterback. If things kind of start breaking down around him, he could struggle. But I still think that a lot of people probably think that he's a bottom 5 to 8 quarterback when he's not. He's right in the middle cluster of Jared Goff's and Derek Carr's and Trevor Lawrence's. Like I think he's somewhere in that kind of middle tier of good quarterback play. Malik Willis is listed as QB2. I don't see it. I think he was way too raw coming out of a small school. And I don't think his athleticism is quite translated, and he has so much to learn in order to be a solid NFL quarterback. So imagine that Will Levis will end up being the number 2, and at some point will be the the main starter here, whether it's next year, 2 years, when exactly it is, I'm not sure. I think Will Levis got a lot of hate in the draft process. I think he's a solid quarterback. Should have gone in the first round, I think. And getting him in the second round is an absolute steal for this Titans team. But overall, I mean, he's a good player. He's got an NFL caliber arm. And I think he's a good decision maker, underrated decision maker, and right away could come in. I think you'll be able to read and process defenses at an NFL level, and hopefully he'll limit some mistakes and be able to develop into a fine player. But hopefully he also doesn't have to touch the field. Hopefully Malik Willis doesn't have to touch the field for this team this year. And then the receiving game is part of why I have a little bit more optimism for this team than I think some people do. Part of that, DeAndre Hopkins is still a legit wide receiver 1. To me, I think it's a little ridiculous how people are viewing Calvin Ridley versus DeAndre Hopkins. Because I still think DeAndre Hopkins is a better wide receiver. Last year, he proved he can still go. The whole steroid, PED suspension, I think really soured his public image. But he's still an excellent wide receiver. He can still get open. He can still win contested catches. And last year when fucking Kyler Murray was still there in Arizona, he still produced very, very well when he came back from his suspension. And 31, his career is not over. I don't think he's washed. I don't watch him and think that he's a washed player. Is he the fringe number 1 wide receiver in the NFL that he was at one point in his career? No, I'm not gonna be silly and argue that. But is he better than Calvin Ridley? Yes. Is he, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Stephon Diggs? No. But is he kind of, Amari Cooper, AJ Brownish? Yeah. I still think he might be a top 10 wide receiver in this league. I definitely don't think he's in the top kind of 6, 7, true number 1 guys who can kind of compete for the number 1 spot. But, he's right around, one of the top 10 wide receivers. And I think he's being horribly, horribly underrated. I still think he's a very excellent player. But not only does DeAndre Hopkins help this offense, just because he's such a great player, it also helps the other playmakers. You don't have to rely on them as much. Traylon Burks is a really good athlete, coming out of Arkansas, but he's a little bit raw. Still needs to kind of learn the position, and he's not a perfect player. He's big, strong, fast dude, but kind of almost DK Metcalf. He's just a little bit limited in what he can do. And so having DeAndre Hopkins, who's a legit number 1 wide receiver, makes Traylon Burks' job a lot easier. Making him your number 2 wide receiver not only helps your number 1, but also makes him it just makes his life a lot easier. Where he can, have a much simpler role and, use his athleticism and his strength to, be an exciting player. And, then making Nick Westbrook-Akine from your number 2 to your number 3 also helps, because he can kind of just be a big body slot guy. Come in, block his ass off, and be very similar to what Alan Lazard has been in Green Bay and what he's going to be in New York. So overall, I just think that's such a force multiplying effect for this offense, and the DeAndre Hopkins signings is so huge, and he's being slept on way too much. And then him being your number one receiver also is going to help Chig Okonkwo and kind of what he can do. He's a super exciting guy coming out of Maryland. Similar to what kind of Jonnu Smith is this weird kind of flex fullback tight end. Super just athletic guy. After the catch, he's super fun to watch. And it's going to make his job a lot easier because you don't need to rely on Chig quite as much because you got DeAndre Hopkins who can win in a pinch. If you need something, you can throw it up to him. It makes Traylon Burks and Chig and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine don't have to overperform and be what they're not. They can kind of, have much simpler roles. And that's going to help this offense a lot. And then Derrick Henry and Tyjae Spears. Derrick Henry is fine as a receiving back. His production is not coming from the receiving game. He's not a true receiving threat. But he can be, catch a screen and take it upfield, be okay in that. I imagine Tyjae Spears might end up taking a good amount of third down, work from Derrick Henry just because he's a little bit more of a receiving upside. But I don't know if he's going to be anything spectacular either. But overall, I do think that this weaponry is underrated. They don't have a whole lot of depth. Maybe Kyle Phillips can kind of break out as kind of a slot option, kind of make Nick Westbrook-Ikhine almost as like a designated tight end almost. Chris Moore is just an okay veteran. Colton Dow ends up making this team as a late round pick. The tight end depth, Trayvon Wesco, Josh Wiley are really more blocking tight ends, and Julius Chestnut's here, but I don't know if he's going to do anything spectacular. So your depth isn't great. But DeAndre Hopkins is legit, and that helps this weaponry so much, and I just don't get why people are so low on him. He's not washed. He can still play. He can still produce, and I think he's going to have a better year than Calvin Ridley. No, I don't think it's going to be the most explosive, passing offense, but bringing DeAndre Hopkins is so huge. It just makes your number one better, it makes your 2 and 3, and your tight end just makes everybody better because he can handle so much that all these other guys can have a lot more simple roles and just use their athleticism and have simple jobs, and it's such a huge benefit for this offense. And then when we talk about the running backs, we still have Derrick Henry, who is one of the top 3 running backs in the NFL still. It's a true stat when what is it when he gets like over 20 carries, like their win-loss record's ridiculous just because who the hell wants to tackle a 6'3", 250-pound man 30 times in a row? No one does. He's just insanely fast, insanely strong, and since he's so big, he's a little bit of a glass cannon sometimes. Sometimes you can hit him and he'll go down easy, but you just keep running him. Who wants to tackle this man in the fourth quarter? No one does. He's such an insane athlete, such a big human being, and he's been able to hold up physically just because he's so large. Force equals mass times acceleration. He has great acceleration and great mass, so he has a lot of force and a lot of power. Just no one wants to tackle him. He's still one of the best running backs in the league, and I don't see any reason for that to be falling off anytime soon. Tyjae Spears, as I said, with receiving, he's an okay player. Good to kind of get some more, people in his backfield because Hassan Haskins wasn't great. But he's fine. I don't imagine he's going to be, real threatening. And if Derrick Henry does go down for a prolonged time, that is going to hurt this offense a lot. And Julius Chestnut's kind of just a third running back. I don't know if he's going to be on the field very much. But overall, I do think you have a very talented group of weapons. There's one spot that I am worried about this team is this offensive line, which isn't great. They're bringing a bunch of new pieces. Aaron Brewer and Dylan Raduins have been here. We'll start with Aaron Brewer. He's a really good run blocker, but I think, he's listed 6'1", 280, 290. Like, he's just a small dude, and so he just cannot hold up in pass pro. You still got, 2 guards who can kind of help do some double teams to kind of help protect him. But he just does not have the play strength to really kind of compete, someone like any of these true, nose tackles. But in the wide zone scheme, he's a good athlete, and he's been able to be a good run blocker because he's able to kind of reach around, seal off, and get to the second level using his athleticism. So he's a good run blocker. So if they do kind of stray away from the Shanahan stuff, it's going to be interesting to see. Is he going to be able to head up block? they're going to do a lot of pulling with him. It's interesting to see what they're going to do. But he's a good run blocker, but obviously just cannot defend the pass very well. But he's a good player. Peter Skoronski or Andre Dillard, one of these two is going to be their best offensive lineman. Kind of just going to see which one's going to be. Peter Skoronski, obviously, it was their first round pick. Very technically refined, pretty good athlete. Someone that could develop and be a really good guard in this league for a lot of years. And I feel pretty good that he's not going to be much of a liability. Like every rookie, he'll have some rough starts, but I think he'll be pretty consistent, pretty steady for this team. Andre Dillard's obviously coming over from Philadelphia. Never really was able to make a push for that starting job. Then obviously Mailata came in and was a beast. So now he's here. It's going to be interesting to kind of see, finally getting a chance. How is he going to look? He was a first round pick. He's a guy with some athleticism. So it's going to be interesting to see if now that he has a chance to play, if he's going to be able to really develop. Now that he's been developing, is he actually going to be able to step up and be a legit starter? But I don't think he's necessarily going to be a complete liability for this team, though. And then Daniel Brunskill, they bring in a guard. I think they're playing him right tackle just because Chris Hubbard. I don't know if he really won that job. He's fine. He's a very low end starter. So I mean, it's better than what you have. They also have Nicolas Petit-Frere, who is suspended for the first 6 games for gambling. I imagine Daniel Brunskill will probably play good enough to where he'll play okay enough where he's not a liability, but when he does come back from suspension, I think Petit-Frere will probably get the start back, but I don't know if he's going to really be much better. So I imagine Daniel Brunskill might end up being the guy who's closing out week 17, week 18. But overall, that right tackle spot's not very strong. Then Dylan Radunes is really interesting to see what he's going to be now he's given a chance. He's one of these guys from North Dakota State, smaller program. They're able to just dominate everybody. He's kind of just been developing, and so it's going to be interesting to kind of see how he plays, if he's able to compete, if he's able to win. He won the starting job, so maybe he's legit. Maybe he's has a tool that's going to develop and be a good starter. Who knows? But he's definitely the biggest question mark and the biggest liability on this offensive line until proven otherwise. So if you're going to be lower about this team, it's going to be because of this offensive line and Tannehill and DeAndre Hopkins. But I just don't get the DeAndre Hopkins hype. I think he's so underrated. And I think Ryan Tannehill's underrated too. I think he's still a really good quarterback. We just need this offensive line to hold up and at least be okay. They don't have anybody that's proven to be, a really good offensive lineman. So this offensive line is a little bit scary. But overall, I think this offense is an underrated unit. And I think it could be really fun. DeAndre Hopkins, being your number one. And it's going to make Chig and Derrick Henry and, Traylon Burks. Like, y'all just go be freak athletes running around. Y'all go have fun. And if we need DeAndre Hopkins to win, he'll win for us. I think this offense just as a whole is underrated. I don't think people also realize how great of a coach and defensive coach that Mike Vrabel is. This defense is legit. And so let's talk about this defensive line, because that's where part of it comes from. Mike Vrabel is just insane at drawing up stunts and phantom pressure and really getting after guys and having, being really aggressive, but still able to keep, the discipline in the run game and, do all this crazy stuff. So the best player is going to be Jeffrey Simmons. Really, really great interior presence. Quinnen Williams just got the bag. Jeffrey Simmons is every bit as good as Quinnen Williams. I don't know if he's quite an elite, talent yet, but he is getting there. He's close to being there. He's an insane player. He can get after the quarterback. He can stop the run. And I think he could have another really good year and really kind of cement himself as one of the elite interior presences in the NFL. And then on the edge, they have Harold Landry, Arden Key, and Rashad Weaver. Harold Landry is obviously coming back from a season-ending injury. So hopefully he still has his athleticism. That's part of what makes him so good. Is kind of just coming off super wide off the edge and using his speed and his bend to kind of get around and be a threat. Is he, what Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, Matt Judon, is he any of what those guys are? No. But I think he's close enough to what Brian Burns or Josh Allen for Jacksonville are. He's kind of just like a poor man's TJ Watt, but he's a really excellent player. Mike Vrabel's going to do a really good job of scheming him up, and I imagine he can have a really productive year here. And then Arden Key and Rashad Weaver, both of those two had pretty good years last year. So I imagine they're going to give you pretty solid play, nothing crazy. They're going to do a lot to kind of help scheme these guys to kind of help them get after the quarterback a little bit more than just kind of how often they can win. But they're both pretty good players. As I said, Arden Key had a really good year last year, and Rashad Weaver did too. So maybe they could kind of keep developing and be really good players for this defense. And then Danico Autry and Tahir Tart are also two really good interior presences. Tahir Tart is an absolute refrigerator and is a really good nose tackle. Colts letting Danico Autry go was so silly because he's a really good interior presence, really good run defender, can get after the quarterback at a decent clip. So overall, you have just a really solid defensive line. With Mike Vrabel's coaching and scheme, they're going to get after quarterbacks and be some really dominant and threatening players. So that's part of the reason why I am so high on this defense is from what Mike Vrabel is going to be able to do for this team getting after the quarterback. The linebacking unit is nothing spectacular. I got Monty Rice, Azeez Al-Shaair, and Jack Gibbons. I didn't know if Jack Gibbons was going to make the team or not. He did over Ben Neiman, who's a veteran, so I guess clearly Mike Vrabel likes him. He's currently listed as a starter. Who knows if he'll stay that way. But Azeez Al-Shaair has been really good when he's played, but he's been behind some really good linebackers there in San Francisco. So now given a chance to start, I think he's someone who could be looking up and could have a really good year. And then Monty Rice also has pretty decent athletic upside. So between Monty Rice or Jack Gibbons, I think you'll get pretty good linebacker play from one of them. And I imagine Azeez Al-Shaair could be a breakout candidate for this team, given this scheme. I think he's gonna, be a really good linebacker. None of these guys are necessarily proven, but I think come end of the year, we're going to feel pretty good, at least two of the three of these guys. And then the secondary, I think, is also getting a lot better. Starts off with Sean Murphy-Bunting. They bring in him from Tampa Bay. So that's going to help this entire secondary unit overall, just because he's a really good man corner. This is a team that is going to run a lot of man coverage. And so him being a man corner, he's really good at that, but also it's going to help Roger McCreary. So Sean Murphy-Bunting has the speed and the technique to be an outside corner. Roger McCreary doesn't necessarily have the athleticism to be a true outside corner. So we're going to kick him into the slot, and hopefully, he'll be a much better slot corner just because, since he's physically limited just a bit, being a slot corner might help him not quite get, toasted quite as much on the outside. But those are two really good players, and then Christian Fulton's a really good corner in his own right. He does have some injury concerns, so as long as he stays healthy, you have three really good corners. So I think overall it's going to be a pretty good secondary with those three. The depth isn't great. Trey Avery's whatever. They keep Anthony Kendall, and then Caleb Farley's IR or the pup list or something. He just was an absolute horrible first-round pick. Made sense why they took the shot at him. Insane athlete, has a great coverage upside, but his injury concerns were part of the reason people were hesitant to draft him, and they've showed up. So I'm not expecting much from the depth pieces, but Mike Vrabel's found a way to have good defenses despite lack in talent sometimes. So I imagine if he keeps these guys, it's for a reason, and I trust Mike Vrabel, and I trust that he knows what he's doing. In the safety room, Kevin Byard is an elite safety. He's one of the best handful of safeties. He can do a little bit of everything. Not like a true box safety, someone like Derwin James, but still, as a smart safety, he can make plays on the back end just as well as, Minkah Fitzpatrick or any of the other, elite safeties. Really good, jack of all trades, great safety. And Amani Hooker, also just a really good safety. Not quite to the level of like a Kevin Byard, but is a really, really good player. Can do a little bit of everything as well. So you got three good corners, two good starting safeties. That's the recipe for good secondary. Elijah Molden is a cornerback, kind of safety hybrid, just a bit of a dime back. They can throw him out there. He can hold up, do some stuff for him. I don't really know if you want him out there playing consistently at either position, really. As a dime back to kind of rotate in, get some reps. He's one of the better dime backs in the league. And then Matthew Jackson and Mike Brown, they keep him a safety depth. Mike Vrabel's keeping them. Trust him for a reason. Overall, part of the reason that I am so much higher on this team is what Mike Vrabel's going to get from this defense. Not only is he one of these defensive coordinators that seems to have his defense overperform and be a much better unit than the talent on paper suggests. So I just trust his overall his X's and O's as well as his culture and tone setting. And this is going to be a team that not a single person wants to play any single week, because they're going to be one of the most physically minded, beat your ass teams. They really got that identity from Mike Vrabel. They know who they are. Overall, let's look at their schedule real quick. So as I said, they're plus 310 to win the AFC South, which to me is kind of ridiculous. The gap between Tennessee and Jacksonville is insane. Jacksonville had a 9.5 win projection. Tennessee's at 7.5. Houston and Indianapolis are at 6.5. That is ridiculous. They are so much closer to Jacksonville than they are to those other two teams. And my projection, I have them about 8.6. I think this is a strong, physical team that nobody's going to want to play. So look at their schedule. I think at home, I don't think Indy or Houston really stand a chance against Tennessee. And the games they should win, I think they should, beat Indianapolis and Houston on the road. I think they should be able to handle Atlanta, Carolina, and even I think they're going to be able to run on Seattle's kind of weaker front. At New Orleans week 1, the Chargers and both games against Jacksonville's are just a little bit of pick'em games. Somewhat. I think they'll end up winning, those games against Jacksonville. And obviously the Chargers have never been able to stop the run. So I could see them winning those games. I really don't think they're going to be a huge underdog. Like I think they're going to be, competitive in every single game with this defense. So I don't really think, at Cleveland, at Pittsburgh, at Tampa, at Miami, those are not necessarily easy road games. But I think, they have the right physical mindset where they're going to be able to at least keep up and keep it close even if they don't win. Then having Cincinnati and Baltimore come to your home, I mean, that's two physical teams. Those are going to be some physical tough matchups. So overall, the top half, Indy, Houston, Atlanta, Carolina, Jacksonville to a certain extent, the Chargers, I think those are games where physically they'll be able to kind of outmuscle and outmatch and really kind of win those games just a little bit based off physicality. But, at Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Tampa, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Miami, I think those are teams that are going to be able to match the physicality. But maybe Tennessee may not just have the talent to fully beat. But overall, I have them at 8.6 wins. And, week 18, they're going against Jacksonville in Tennessee. I think that game's going to be for the AFC South. And, December, January football with Derrick Henry to win the division. Mike Vrabel coaching. I'm going to pick that team unless they're going against Kansas City, Cincinnati, or Buffalo probably. I think that this Tennessee Titans team is going to shock a lot of people, win this division. And, I don't get why they are being so slept on. I really don't. Now let's go ahead and talk about kind of everything, just kind of recap it, and we'll get you out of here. So overall, I think it was a good offseason of kind of just removing some of the deadwood of these aging vets who weren't really helping or, weren't quite the players that they used to be. And I do think that they still have great coaching and a really good culture from Mike Vrabel. I think Ryan Tannehill is an underrated quarterback. And I think this is the potential for a fun offense with kind of Derrick Henry, Traylon Burks, and Derrick Henry running all over the place. And DeAndre Hopkins still being an excellent wide receiver. This offensive line is weak, though. If anything does hold them back, it's going to be that unit. But I think this defense is going to be elite. Their schedule gets a little bit lighter towards the end. So I do think that, when they're making a playoff push, they're going to be hot. So I'm telling you, week 18, a hot Tennessee Titans team, coached by Mike Vrabel with his elite defense and a really good offense. They did that one time, and what happened? Oh, yeah, they made the AFC Championship game. So I think this is a horribly, horribly, horribly underrated team. I'm very excited to see the Tennessee Titans, and I am so confident. I am putting money on them to win the AFC South. I truly, truly believe that they are the best team in the AFC South. Is there a chance that this offensive line is poor and makes them miss the playoffs? Definitely. But I do think that they are going to, get at least 9 wins, maybe even 10, and win this division. I think at the very least they're going to get 8. So I think the over underline, slam the over, and throw some money on them to win this division because I think they have a chance to do it. I think this is a super, super slept on team. So Tennessee Titans fans, Jacksonville Jaguars fans, just anyone in the AFC, please let me know your thoughts. Where am I right about this team? Where am I wrong? And we'll be back with our number 14 team very, very soon. Anyways, guys, thank y'all very much for watching. We'll be back with the next video soon. Peace.